Short-term memory is the second stage of memory, and it's my absolute favorite because there's a lot of really fun things to talk about with short-term memory. So generally speaking, there's about 4 different areas of interest in your short-term memory that you'll want to be familiar with. The first is the process that moves information from your sensory to your short-term memory, and that process is called selective attention. Now remember, all the sensory information that you experience, everything you see, hear, smell, all of that goes to your sensory memory, but most of it never goes any farther because that's a whole lot of information. What we pay attention to is what goes to our short-term memory. It's what we're kind of aware of. So yes, you can try to pay attention to things and put them in your short-term memory, but what's really interesting to me is that sometimes your brain, without any kind of action on your part, hears a piece of sensory information or sees a piece of sensory information, and your brain decides that you should pay attention to it before you make a decision to. I'll give you an example. I'll be driving down the road singing ridiculously loud, probably embarrassing myself, and then all of a sudden I'll just get the feeling that someone is watching me, and I'm doing my thing, and I slowly look to my left, and sure enough, somebody is staring me down. Well, how did I know that? Well, some people just think it's magic or, it's some kind of ESP kind of thing. But what it is probably, there's scientific evidence to suggest, is that when you're looking straight ahead, you can see what's in front of you, but you also see all kinds of images over here. You're just not focusing on them. But if your brain sees something over here, remember, all this stuff's going to your brain. If your brain sees something over here, even though you're not paying attention to it, if it matters, your brain might go, let's pay attention to that over there. So somebody staring at you usually is an important thing that we like to know. So the idea is that your brain sees that even though you're not consciously focusing on it, and that selective attention forces you to put that information in your short-term memory. If I'm looking straight ahead in my room and all of a sudden a fire breaks out over here, I'm probably going to turn to the right and notice that as well. Same thing if you're in a really crowded room and there's all kinds of noises, but you hear your name and you're like, whoa, how did I hear my name out of all that noise? Well, your brain recognizes your name, and that process of selective attention says, my name usually matters, so I'm going to pay attention to what's going on over there. So, selective attention puts information to your short-term memory, sometimes without our conscious awareness. The next really interesting thing in your short-term memory is the digit span test. If you've ever had a legitimate IQ test, they'll give you a digit span test to test your short-term memory. And basically all they do is the tester will say numbers to you, and then you will have to repeat those numbers back in the same order that they are given to you. Most people on average can hold about 7 numbers, or what we call bits of information, in their short-term memory. The range is 5 to 9, but the average is 7, so we actually call 7 the magic number of your short-term memory. Well, what's really interesting is that we can improve our memories through little tricks, some of which I try to give you in these videos. If we can combine information into one, what we call chunk, then we actually can keep more information in our brain. For example, I just told you that most people can only remember about 7 bits at a time, or 7 numbers, but if I give you a series of 12 numbers, I'm pretty sure most of you could remember those, if these are those numbers. 1, 2, 3, 6, 6, 6, 9, 0, 2, 1, 0. So, again, I just spat a whole lot of numbers out at you, and if you were just trying to remember one by one, you probably got overwhelmed. But if you started to look for patterns or look for meaning, you might go, wow, he said the first few numbers, that's one thing. 666 is a number that many cultures associate with evil, so that's a second thing. And 90210 is a TV show, so that's a third thing. So basically what your short-term memory just did is it took that information and made a whole lot of bits into just 3 chunks. So that can be a way to improve your short-term memory. The last characteristic of your short-term memory that I want to talk about is a process called maintenance rehearsal. Maintenance rehearsal just involves simple repetition, either out loud or in your brain. But whenever you're trying to remember something, you're trying to hold on to it, that's what maintenance rehearsal is. Sometimes before a test, people will cram just by repeating stuff over and over again in your head. Well, you can keep stuff in your short-term memory by repeating it, but unfortunately, the second you stop actively repeating it, it starts to go away. So short-term memory is only the second stage. For information that you want to remember longer, you'll want to put it into the final stage of memory. But for short-term, make sure you know the test we use, the digit span test. Make sure you know that 7 is the magic number, that maintenance rehearsal is a process that keeps information in your short-term memory, and that selective attention is the process that brings it to your short-term memory from your sensory memory.